Somebody asked me this morning if I was nervous about giving a talk here, and I said no. Partly because it's such a friendly audience, and such an interesting audience, and it's a different audience. And I think one of the reasons people like me accept invitations like this is precisely that it is a different audience, and therefore you learn some things that you just had no idea about, and so it's been a very stimulating couple of days for me just hanging out and talking, and certainly when we got into the bourbon, things really got okay. There's an event in New York City that I take a lot of interest in, which comes around the end of January, and it's when they add up and declare the total bonuses which were awarded on Wall Street. And end of January this year, the figure came in, and it was $33.2 billion. I had a couple of reactions to that. First was, and it was only 2% down from the year before. And I had a couple of reactions to that. One was, well, thank God for that. The state budget is going to stay stable. I may get a contract at CUNY, since we've been not working with a contract for a couple of years, you know. The other negative side is real estate prices shoot up every time the bonuses come in. But then I thought, well, but this is really interesting, because around the same time, an estimate came out from the IMF that kind of said this mess in financial markets right now is going to cost probably the order of $1 trillion before it's through. It's already cost about $200 billion. It's going to cost around $1 trillion. And I thought, you know, getting bonuses of $33.2 billion for screwing up the world's financial system and losing $1 trillion seems to me a pretty good rate of return. Now, of course, some people did lose their jobs. But the first thing you notice is they didn't give back any of the money they'd earned over the last 5-10 years, probably raking in at least $10 million a year, if in some cases as much as $30 million a year. And those who lost their jobs, some of them were given golden handshakes. Stan O'Neill got $161 million. Poor fellow Charles Prince only got $40 million. So you look at this and you kind of say, this is a fairly obscene story which you're hearing. And particularly when you capture the other side of it. And the other side of it is that, of course, as of around that same time, figures vary, but around 1.6 million people have been foreclosed upon. It's estimated that there are probably another 2, so you may end up with 4 million foreclosures around the country. And then I found something kind of interesting, because I've been following this only sort of anecdotally. So I went to the web and I pulled off some stuff about the foreclosures, and I'll pass these around. The first comes from the BBC, and you'll not be able to see this from here, but the first is a map of foreclosures in Cleveland. The second is this map is the distribution of African American and Hispanic populations. And immediately you see there's something going on here. The second is from a town I'm very familiar with, which is Baltimore. And these are the foreclosures in 2006 and 2007. And what's interesting to me about this is the number that occurred in 2006, but we didn't pay any notice to this until Bear Stearns' hedge funds went under last summer. But the foreclosure wave has been there for some considerable time. And when you go to the pattern of it, since I know this city very well, I know each of these neighborhoods very well, I know perfectly well where this is happening. And it is, of course, primarily in African-American neighborhoods. And in addition, reports from Baltimore suggest that it's not only African-Americans who are being hit, but women in particular single-headed households, are losing houses at some enormous kind of rate. So that's the Baltimore story. The New York Times caught up with this and did a whole series of things. So there's a series of maps of this sort, again talking about the racial, primarily the racial. But what is so interesting to me is, I'll pass these around, you can sort of just look at them.